stay in the timeline, right? With the preemptive, obviously, that's the ones that could go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So those are kind of like the harder ones to do. So this question actually asks for first come, first serve. Round robin and SRT are the two preemptive ones. So I will leave that. Let me go through the other one, which is SGF. I'll have to go on the whiteboard because this one will have it here. Right, so that one, the second one would be SGF, which is shortest job first. And because this is a preemptive, sorry, a non-preemptive, that means, again, once it goes into the timeline, it cannot come out, right? So we have our timeline. Let me draw it down here. The timeline always starts at 0. And we had, I don't know if you want me to write all the process here, right? So we have A, shoot, I don't mess this up this time. You all could see the question in the back? In the back of the whiteboard?
No.
Okay. I can see it, then you can see it. Okay, so we have A was the process. The arrival time was 0. I try not to type too much. Write it out because it looks so crappy. B arrival time was 1. Whose time was 6. C arrival was 4. Whose time was 1. Arrival was 7. Whose time was 4. And E arrival was 8. This was 3. Right, so this is basically, so this is how the question was, right? So this is, it says A for arrival time, B for boost time, so you don't get confused. Right, so your shortest job boost. So technically your shortest job depends on your boost time and which one has the shortest time to execute. So if you're just looking at your burst time, basically it would be this one first, because that's only 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 6. So that would have been the order it would go into. However, because of your arrival times, you have to be aware of when these processes came in. So let's look at, let's say this one, C, that has the shortest burst time. If we were to put this in first, we would be wrong because at time 0, C didn't exist technically at time 0. C will only exist at time 4, which would be somewhere around here on your timeline, right? So even though it has the shortest amount of time to be executed, at this point 0, it cannot be executed because it's not even in the lineup as yet, in the queue. So even though, oh man, could I undo that? Right. Even though it is the shortest, it still all depends on the arrival time. So with this one, okay, so good question. Somebody was just asking if 2 processes arrive at the same time. Again, in this case, If two of them had arrived at the same time, you would go with the shortest one. In other cases, like for instance, the one before, if you have, let's say, A and B arriving at the same time, and it's first come, first serve, you could pick anyone. It really shouldn't matter. And again, in other methods or algorithms, if they arrive at the same time, it might depend on the execution time as opposed to which one will go in first. So that is actually a good question in terms of two or more arriving at the same time. You will have to look at your first time or execution time to decide which one is which. I hope I answer correctly. Right, so in this case, at time 0, we only have A to deal with. So that means A has no choice but to go in. And once A goes in, because this is a non-preemptive, it must stay for the full cycle of 2. Right? Secondly, when we reach cycle 2 and A is finished, if you look in the list, it has nothing waiting except B, because B arrived at 1, which would have been somewhere midway here between where A was. So at this point, the only thing to go into next would be B. So even though it's not going to be the shortest job, at that point in time, it's the only job, so it will have to go in. And because it cannot come back out, it has to stay for the full 6 cycles, which would take you to 8. So at this point time 8, if you notice here, that means C, D, and E all are now waiting to be processed. And because they have more than one process, now that all of them are there, now we could go with the shortest. So the shortest in this case out of those 3 would be C, which would go to 9. And then between D and E, it would be E, because E is 3. So we put E next, which will go to 12. And then D will go last, which will go to 8. Right? So because of the arrival times, it might not always depend on the boost time in this case. You have to make sure they are in the queue waiting to be processed before you could actually check what the shortest one is. Right? And the working out of it again is the same thing. Start time minus arrival for waiting, and completion time minus arrival for turnaround. I'm not going to work that out for this one, so it should be pretty straightforward. It will be more or less just like the first one. Right, so that is your SGF. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
But I fix it back though.
Do the calculations for the waiting time and turnaround. Somebody just asked a question in the chat. So okay, that's cool. I'll do it. Okay, so okay, so somebody still want me to do this, which is fine. So we have the waiting time, which is your start time minus your arrival time. You should write these down so you could have this for revision. And then your turnaround time is your time was completed minus your arrival time. So basically with these two, it just means your waiting time. It just means how long the process waited before it started to process, right? Your turnaround time, it just means how long it was in the queue, how long it took it from the start to the finish to be processed. So with your waiting time, like for instance, A arrival time was 0 and it started to process at 0. So that means A waited 0 time. As A came into the queue, it started to process. So that would have been 0 minus 0. Or maybe I can write it down too. So that would have been 0 minus 0 for A. For B started to process at 2. It came in at 1. So that means from 2 to 1, it just waited for like one cycle before it actually started. For C, it started to process at 8, but it actually came, it arrived at 8 minus 4, because that's the time it arrived. 4. Well, I'll go in order. Anyway, I'll go in order, even though this timeline a little bit. For D started to process at 12, and it arrived at 7. Should have been 5. And E started at 9, came at 8, it should have been 1. So basically, these would have been the waiting time for each one. And if they ask for average, it would have just been to add this up. 9, 10, 11 divided by 5, and that would have been the average. So this is your waiting time, right? For the turnaround time, as we say, is pretty much kind of the same. Time was completed. A was completed at 2, so 2 minus 0. B was completed at 8, minus 1, 7. C was completed at 9. So once you have your timeline here, you can just look and see. So C ended at 9. 9 minus 4. D or E, whichever one you want to go. Let's say E. E was completed at 12, and E arrived at 8. 4. And then D was completed at 16, and it arrived at 7. So that would be 9. So this would be your turnaround time. Right? So again, it's just a matter of watching your timeline and trying to figure out when it starts, when it stops. When it starts would be your line, when it stops would be your next line, and you just minus it from your arrival time. Right? So that should be good for that one. So again, remember those two were the non-preemptive. So first come, first serve, and the SJF, non-preemptive. Other two, which is here, which is the SRT and the round robin, those are preemptive. So those tend to be a little more difficult because the processes go in and out, in and out, in and out. So let's look at the round robin. And remember with the round robin, it gives you a time slice or a time quantum telling you how each process is only allowed to stay in the queue 2 cycles at a time. So after the 2 cycles, one have to leave, another one have to come in, 2 cycles, one leave, one come in, etc., etc. So with the round robin, again, we start at 0. You have, at time 0, we only have A. So A will go in, and you will notice that A only needs 2 cycles. So A will stay for the 2 cycles and then it will stop. Then B will come in. Now, even though B needs 6 cycles, it could only do 2 at a time, right? So B will stay for 2 and then come out. C will come in this case, C only needs 1. So it will just stay for 1 because it don't need to stay for the 2 cycles in this case. So when C finishes its 1 cycle, you will notice that we only at 5 in this case. You look at the table, at 5, we don't have anything else here because D and E wouldn't have arrived as yet. D will come in at 7 and E will come in at 8. So at point 5, the only thing that we could do here is go back up and start back again. Now here we already know A finish, so we don't have to go back to A. B is the only one that is waiting right now. Remember, B initially needs 6, but it already did 2. So B still has 4 cycles left. C finished because C only has 1. So at this point, I feel I might have to go to the whiteboard if you get in trouble with this, but I'll go back there if you want. So at this point, B went back in for another 2 cycles. Then that took us to 7. At 7, now D is waiting. So D will go in for 2 cycles. Then E is waiting. E will go in for 2 cycles. And basically, you'll just keep going around and round until all of them are completed. So B again, then D, and then E. So this, of course, depends again on how long it's going to take. And because you can't do all 6 in one, or in this case, all 4 in one or 3 in one, it has to be done in sections. 2 at a time, 2 at a time, 2 at a time. Okay, somebody asked if I post this document. Well, for this, they have general notes, but the actual doing of the process is only what we would have done in class previously. Because to put this in a note is very hard. That's why I prefer to actually do them in class, right? So it might not have a direct note showing what I just showed, but it will have the general notes of what each algorithm does and how it does it and so on.
Jamil, you
right, so it's just a matter of going in and out into your time. Now working it out for this one too might be a little difficult because it has several start times and several stop times. Let me go back to that.
And then proof of academics. Yeah, on this washroom, I don't know why.
See him, I don't use it upstairs. So you go downstairs.
Oh, yeah, man. Authorization letter. Proof of address. What proof of address is?
That's the best right here.
Okay.
So this is back to the wrong order. I'm just going to do it over here, please. Remember, it's important to remember your time slice is 2. So really and truly, the purpose of this is to give each process an equal amount of time to process, to execute. Because what tends to happen sometimes is that if you have 1 or 2 processes that have a large execution time, what tends to happen is that if it goes into the queue, it tends to use up all the resources at once just for that one process. As opposed to if you have several doing at a time, it will give each person a fair share. So that's the purpose of what the round robin is. So again, we start with A. And in this one is important that you know that after A spends its 2, that means he's done. So he don't have to go back into the queue, right? It goes B, let's stay for 2,
You have copies of your ID?
Again, if you look at B, B's total is actually 6.
Yeah.
Because it spent 2 cycles already here now, it still only needs 4 to complete. But it can't just stay there and complete. It has to, once it have other processes waiting, it has to go and now go to the next process. So C was actually waiting. C only needs 1, so it will stay just for 1. So at this point now, C is finished. It's important to know that actually now we are time 5, D and E not available. So the only thing available right now is B. So we go back to B, another 2. So remember that will be 4 minus 2 now. So that is now down to 2. And at 7, we could go up for D. That will stay for 2. And then E will also stay. Oh gosh, look at the 2 there. 9. Right. So we went through the complete list. So you go back up now. We know that B still needs 2 cycles. And then B would be complete. And if you look at the timeline here, you will see B was here 3 times. So that's 2, 4, 6. So we know that it spent its full 6 times there in order to be executed. D stayed 2 cycles already. In all, it needs 4, so it needs another 2 cycles here. And E stayed 2 cycles and only need 1 more, so it'll finish off with E, which is 6. So this is how your round robin should look. And then calculations would be same thing, start, same formula. However, this one usually might have several start times, so you might have more than one thing to do. So let's see. A. A only started, A wouldn't change. 0 minus 0 was B. If you look at B, B's actually started 3 separate times. So on the first time, it started at 2, the arrival time was 0. So that's 2 minus 1. Sorry, the arrival time was 1. Then it started again at 5. So this means from point 4 to 5 is when it was actually waiting. So it would be 5 minus 10 at 11. So from point 7 to 11 is when it waited here. So that is 11 minus 7. It's just a matter of watching to see when it starts, when it stops. So all in all would be 1 plus 1 is 2 plus 4 is 6. Because C only start once. So it would be, it started at 4, it arrived at 4. D started at 7, it arrived at 7. Then it also started at 13. So from point 9 to point 13 is when it would have waited, which would be 4. So in total, that would be 4. And then E started at 9, arrived at 8, and it restarted at 15, from 11 to 15. So that would be the waiting times for each one. Turnaround time would be just one thing, complete. So A completed at 2, B completed at 13. Same thing, just minus the arrival time from it. C completed at 5. D completed at 15. And E completed at 16. So that wouldn't change. Only the waiting time would have multiple calculations. So hopefully this would be okay. Again, these things take a little practice to understand. You just have to go through some. You could actually look up some questions online if you want. I think most of the questions in the past papers we would have looked at. I'll still go through and see if it have any others that to give you so you could practice. I will do that today actually. I will look at all three things that we did and look for questions and send for you all to do so you could practice since you have next week off. Right, so that's your round robin. We still have the next one to do still. The last one, which is SRT. So remember, SRT is shortest remaining time. Should go back on your whiteboard to do that too. So let me just erase what I have here. Gosh. Right. So shortest remaining time, which is a preemptive again. So it's important to know which one is preemptive and non-preemptive so you'll know if you have switching in and out to do. A, most of all of these started with A. A not affected in any way in this example. B, right. So at this point, we are at point 2 now, right? B is in the queue. Yeah, this one tends to give people a lot of trouble. So B initially needed 6 cycles to complete. It started at 2. So at point 3 is 1 cycle. At point 4 is 1 cycle. Now at point 4, that's when C will appear. That's C's arrival time. C's burst time is only 1. At this point, B has already stayed 2 cycles. So from the original one, B is now 4. So at this point, we have B at 4 and C at 1. C is now the shortest remaining time. So what happens is B has to now leave and C has to come in. So C will come in. C only needs 1 cycle. So it will stay and then it will finish. So it will leave. So we are now at point 5. Again, just like when you round robin, D hasn't even come in as yet. So that means the only thing that is waiting currently right now is B. So B gonna go back in here. And it will stay for a cycle, another cycle. At cycle 7 is when D will come in. And D is 4. But at that point, at cycle 7, B has already stayed 2 additional cycles. So B is now down to 2. So B is smaller than 4. So B could actually stay. And then we will go to 8. And E waited actually the shortest one. So B, once B goes in here, it will actually stay. It will stay for the 4 cycles that was needed up to 9. So again, we look for the shortest one, which would be E. And then D. So again, is C1. Oh, it's C1 a little confusing, but with a little practice, yeah, we don't do that because of it. Right. The little practices work out is get to understand the importance of the arrival time and what actually waiting in the queue and what is still to come. And again, let's see the working out part. The waiting time for A would be 0 again. For B, it would be 2 minus 1. And again, 5 minus 4, just like similar to your round robin. For C, it would be 4 minus 4. For D, 12 minus 7. And for E, it would have been 9 minus 8. Turn around, well, it should be able to work that out now, would be 2 minus 0 for A. For B, it would be 9 minus 1. For C, it would be 5 minus 4. 16 minus 7, and then 12 minus 8. So that would be it for that. Right, so that should take care of this scheduling or CPU scheduling. Sorry, not just scheduling. CPU scheduling, let me write that down so in case I get tempted. So that is referred to as CPU scheduling. Or sometimes you might see it as process scheduling. So that was that first one that we did. Right, any questions on that? I assume everybody okay with that, right? Yes, no. Where is oh Boyce, look here. Boyce, you there? Boyce not there. Right, so that was that one. The second one we did was yeah, right. And this was the one that you was wanted to go over.
Yeah. Right.
You're cool with it, or you still will figure it out on your own and whatever.
You explain it well.
Okay, good. So again, hopefully everybody okay with this. You need to take some time and actually go through these things on your own, because obviously, you know, me just explaining is not enough. You need to figure it out on your own as well, right? And of course, still, if coming down to the end, you still have some issues, I will just have to go through it again. That's not a problem. So, however, but you can't just let me explain and say, okay, I understand, I don't understand, I don't understand. And you need to sit down a little bit with it on your own. And then if you really, really can't get it out, then obviously we will go through it again, right? Right, so that was the first one. The next one was the deadlock. which was, oh, I went back to scheduling. That was module 4 would be deadlock. So I have a thing here of bankers questions we did in class, so I'll put that back up. That on Canvas, so I had to give you all an example there. I think surprisingly most people had understand this. I'll still go through it, but this actually used to give the most amount of trouble for people to understand. But I learned how to explain it a little better. So I don't feel people as get as much trouble as before, like when I now started to teach it and I was a little shaky. So you see, same thing, and we just have to get accustomed to. At first, I think I could clearly admit that I feel I never used to teach this topic properly. But now I feel I have it. I can do it with my eyes closed. So anyway, so I'll go through this one next just to make sure everybody. These are the three questions that we did in class. So we did a lot of practice on this one. So this is it. Okay. I'm just gonna come back in 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. I come. Right. So with this one now, remember all these things, no matter what topic it is. Basically, all of these things is to make sure we get in the best use out of the operating system. And in this one is to make sure that we're not going into what we call a deadlock. Again, all the theory is there on Canvas, so you can read through to see what all that means in terms of deadlock. Basically, a deadlock is where your computer is more or less going to be at a standstill, where it could possibly crash or get to a point where nothing is happening, right? Um, right. So with this one, they give you, they say here, consider the following snapshot of a system that has 5 processors, 0 to 4. P0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes this could be A, B, C, D, E. It's not a fixed thing, right? I think a question lower down actually had it as, no, none of these had it as that, but different resources that are already allocated to different processes. And in this case, this particular example has 4 different resources, A, B, C, and D. Again, these resources could be anything. The best example would be like actual like printers or printers is the best one. The other things are usually internal stuff, so it's harder to visualize or understand. So let's say, for instance, this is like if it's a networking system or whatever. Resource
right?
A currently, question lower down, had it as one that is assigned to P1 and three that is assigned to resources that are already allocated. A that is allocated would be 4. That tree. And in this case, this particular example has, so that's what the allocation. This is what is currently allocated. Again, these resources could be, and again, you would see that best example because you could like actual like processing. You don't have to do one at a time. This is the best. All of them could be in some stage of execution. That's why you have resources allocated. So let's say, for instance, here is like what is the maximum amount needed in order to be processed or whatever, fully. For instance, currently, question maximum amount is would be 1 that is assigned to P1. That means any of the resources that A already allocated. A that is allocated would be 4. In this case, this particular example has. So that's what the allocation is. This is what is currently allocated. Again, these resources could be, and again, out of all the resources, best example would be like actual like currently. You don't have to do, so the point here now is the best. All of them could be in some stage of like using what we have. That's why you have resources allocated. And what is left, let's say for instance, if we can properly process all the maximum amount needed in order to be processed without having the system crashes. For instance, if currently the maximum amount needed would be 1 that is assigned to P1. That means so the first question they ask is that how many already allocated that is allocated would be finished in order to this particular example has. So that's what the allocation is. This case currently again, these resources could be identified out of all the resources. Best example would be like actual one here is like you have to do like a full point here now. You have to best all of them could be in some stage of like using what we have. That's why you have resources allocated. Let's say for instance, if we properly process all the maximum amount needed, 3 and 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this would be 1, 2, 3, and 2 is 5. So this is how it is currently allocated actions. For instance, if you allocated that's the one that is assigned to P1. So the first question they ask is that how many already allocated that is allocated would be finished by this particular tells you how many resources the computer initially had. So it originally started off with 4, 11, 12, 6. But the workout initial amount is usually your allocation multiplied by your available, right? Now remember with this is like a normal maths formula. So initial resource that is assigned to right? So the first question they ask is that how many already allocated that is allocated would be finished by initial this tells you how many resources the computer initially had. So it originally started off with 4, and similarly, if they might give you any 2 of these, so sometimes they might give you the initial and the allocation, so it's just a minus to figure out what is the available. Just like any other maths formula, you could substitute them to work out, right? So that's how you work out. The amount is usually once you have the initial amount, now you could go to the second part, right? So the second part, remember with this is like a normal maths formula. And so basically, that is a sign. It's just like a line. So the first question they ask is that E already outlined position and allocated with the finished by this resources to complete the minus allocation. So it originally started off with Mark 4 minus allocation. And similarly, they might give you any two of these. So sometimes they might give you the partial class, so you should have application. So it's just a minus to figure out. So this would be just like you take it each one and minus it. 0 minus 0, right? So that's how you would go. Is usually what we have the initial amount multiplied by your second part, right? But the second that for each one, so you could see what each one would have. So P1 would be 0, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, P0 would be that. P1 would be 0, 6 minus 1 is 5, minus 1, 4 minus 1 is 3. So, 2 would be 0, 2 minus 1 is 2, 3, minus 0, right? So that's how you would go. So is usually what we have the initial amount multiplied by your second part, right? So the second that for each one, so you could see what each one would have. So P1 would be 0, 6, 3, but that will be a needs matrix. So that's how you will move out part P. Sorry, P0 will be that. P1 would be 0, yeah. So that will be part B, right? You just move out what is needed. The second part, that's a school, right? Sorry, the third part now, determine whether the system is in a safe state. You must support your answer with proper working and stating if it is safe. So in order to do that, we need to have the needs matrix, which we have there. And we need to compare it. One would be the school. Right. What is available? Third part now. Determine whether the system is in a safe state. You must support your answer with this here is your needs matrix, right? Stating if it is safe. The available amount from the table was 0, 2, 2, 1. So in order to do that, we need to have the needs matrix, which we have there. And we need to compare it. One would be what is so basically what you're doing here is comparing what you have in each what is available with what is available. So looking at the first process in a safe state, you must support your answer. Remember this 0, 3, 2, 1, right? Stating if it is currently have available amount from the table. So that means for B where you need 3, we only in order to do that we need to have we cannot satisfy that, right? That's like supply and demand. We have there. We need 3 and we need to compare it. One would be 2. Second one, same thing. So basically what you're doing here is comparing what you have in the what is available with what is available. So looking at the first one, 0, 2, you must support your answer. But this is 3, 2, 1. Currently have available amount from one table. So that is one that B where you want 3 would be we only in order to do that we need to have we cannot satisfy that. First thing we're gonna do here is supply and demand. We need 3. The ones we have here is one would be that means the resource. Second one same. So basically what you're doing here is compare what you have in the available what is available. So looking at the first process, right? So 0 was must support your answer. But this is 3, 2, 1. what tables we currently have available amount from one table. So that's the one that be where you want three, just add it back. We only have order to be at, we need to have, we cannot satisfy. This now becomes here is exciting in our system. So we kind of we have parents, one would be, then we go on to the next second one to say that basically I take one, then you have to keep so we have these one, right? So the second one is 4, we only have 3, and this is 3, so we go back up to the top. There are 3 warranty have available amount from one table. So this is the one that be where you want 3, add it back. We only have order to be at, and one how has satisfied. This now becomes here and that was which is 053. So kind of we have parents, one would be, then we go on to the next second one to say that basically I take one, then you have to keep so we have this one, technically one is right? So the second one is 4, we have 3, and this is 3, so we go back up to the top. There are 3 warranty have available amount from one table. This is one that I very want 3, right? It can be that, order to be at, and one how has satisfied. This now becomes what is and that was one to P1 initially gone down which is 053. Kind of we have parents, one would be, then we go on to the next second one to say that basically I take one, then you have to keep so we have this one, technically right? So the second one is 4, we have 3, and this is 3, so we go back up to the top. There are 3 warranty have available. Amount from one table. This is one that I very want 3, right? It can be that. P2 now. P2's amount was order to be at, and one has satisfied. This now becomes what is and that was one to P1 initially gone down which is 05120. Which we added back to this kind of we have parents, one would be, then we go on to the next second one to say that basically I take one, then you have to keep so we have this one, technically right? So the second one is 4, we have 3, and this is 3, so we go back up to the top. There are 3 warranty have available. Amount from one table. This is one that I very want 3, right? It can be that. P2 now, P4 amount was 0123. Which means we ended up with 4, 11, 12. 6 amount was initial amount we have here. Order to be that's the process. This is what and that was done to P1 initially down the original amount of 05 is that 1, 2, 4, 11, 12, 6, which we added and it was and you have parents, one would be, and then you go on to the next second one to say basically I take one, then you have what you have so we have this one and right? So the second one is 4, we have 3, and this is 3, so we go back up to 3, 0, there are 3 warranty have available 3, right? It can be that. We find out in this now, in order for the system not 01 to deadlock and to stay safe. Right. You all understand that part? 4, 11. That's part C, right? 6 amount was initial amount we have here. Order to be that's the part D now. This is part is done. If a request from process original arise for additional resources of this 4, 11, and the algorithm grant request and the order says, and then you have here is one means that then it was the next one. In order for the system not 0, 1 into a deadlock and to stay safe. Right. So what we need to do, understand that first of all is if a request has process, right, to arrive to additional resources of 0, we have errors that one means that first thing we need to put in order for the system not 0, 1 into a deadlock and to stay safe. 0, 1, 2, 0. Right. So what we need to do, understand that first of all is 1. If a request has process, right, what to arrive is to additional resources. 0, we have errors that one means that first thing we need to put no, if you add in these systems here, 0, 1, that means everything else is going to be affected. So what you have available is going to be affected, and then of course your needs matrix will be affected, and then of course the whole sequence will be affected. So you have to go back through the whole process. So first of all, we'll need to work out what is available. Now technically all we did here, we took what was available before was 0, 2, 2, 1, and they asked us to give 2, 0, 1, 1, 0. So technically all we did was just minus. No, if you add in through the process of working it out by working out your new allocation, which I will do just to show you that is the same thing. So your new allocation would be all we did here, 4, so now we 5 and 1, 6 and 2. But 8 was available before, 10 was 0 and 1, 4 and 3 is 7, 2, 1, 9, 10, 11. And they asked us to give 1, 2, 0, 1, 1, 0. So technically all we did was we started with no, if you add by 0, 1, 1, working out your new allocation, which I will do just to show you that is the same thing. So your new available amount is 0, 4, took 1, 1, 5 and 1, 6 and 2. But 8 was available before, 10 was 0 and 1, 4 and 3 is 7, 2, 1, 9, 10, 11. And they asked us to give 1, 2, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. So technically all we did other thing that is going to change is it needs matrix. So because process 2 is using up more resources That means the needs matrix. No, if you add minus that by 1, 1. You know, the new allocation, which I will do just to show you that is the same that thing. Is the new thing it has become. So you new minus here, but we have a one trick 5 and 6 and 2. But minus was available before 10. You cannot confuse it. I'm trying to do all entries 7 so in one time. Or that go back to ask us to give minus in this we should get 0, 0, 2 minus 2 is 1, 5 minus 3 is right? Other thing that is going to change is its matrix. So this should be our again matrix, which is 0, 1, process 2, 0. Is using up more. That's means that at this line here, needs third line, which is no, if you add one. You know, and once you have that new matrix, again, it's just a matter of that is the new thing it has equals. So you new minus here, what we have in matrix. This one again, it needs 3, we only have 1 available. The second one needs 5, we only have 1. The third one it needs 2, we only have 1. So again, back in house, that's it again. Minus like in the other one, so you can start off with P3 minus 2. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, right? Minus 3, right? Other thing that is going to change is this matrix. So this should be our again, because we want 0, 1, process 2, 0. Is using up more. That's means that at this line here, needs third line, which is no, if you add minus 3, we only have 1. 5, we only have 2, you know, and once you have that one matrix, again, it's just a matter of that is what we could take it as equals. So you want to minus here, for example, I change the we have 1 matrix. This one again, it needs 3, we only have 1 available. The second one needs 5, we only have 1. The third one it needs 2, we only have 1. Two amounts again, minus like in the other one. Let's see. Needs third line, which is no, if you add we only have 1. 5, we only have 2, you know, and once you have that one matrix, again, it's just a matter of that is what we could take it as equals. So you want to minus here, for example, I change the we have 1 matrix. This one again, it needs 3, we only have 1 available. The second one needs 5, we only have 1. The third one it needs 2, we only have 1. Two amounts again, minus like in the other one. Let's see. And needs third line. No, if you add we have 1. 5, next, and so on and so on. Once you have that one matrix, again, it's just a matter of that is what we could take. Once you reach here, for example, I change, so you have a new safe this one again, it needs 3, once you have 1, 2, 5, we only have 1. In answering this question, you only have 1. And 2 amounts again, it's C. Minus like again, grant could be requested. Needs third line, right? So that's the no, if you add we have 1. 5, next, once you have that one matrix, again, you have right. Then you can have a new same first one again, it means 3, instead of 2, second one 5, in answer, that's what it is. And to amount again, the last one is from minus, like yes, again, if you're okay with today, one could be whatever you like, right? Five, once you have that one matrix, again, you have right. Then you can first one again is 3, instead of 2, second one 5, in answer, that's what it is. And to amount again, the last one is from minus, like yes, again, if you're okay with today, one could be whatever you like, right? This five, once you have that one matrix, again, you have right. Then you can same thing, first one again is 3, instead of 5, in answer, that's what it is. And to amount again, the last one is from minus, like yes, again, if you okay with today, 10, then you can this once you have that one matrix, again, what they have said is same thing, this one again is 3, instead of 5, in answer, that's what it is. The last one is from like yes, if you okay with today, 10, this once you have that one matrix, again, what they have said is same thing, this one again is 3, instead of 5, in answer, that's what it is. The last one is from like yes, 10, this one way up by some size, this is a matter once you have that one matrix, coming back to 22. From 22, you will notice it goes back to 20. You didn't see this in any other example. From 20 again, we go to 40. From 40, we go back down to 6. From 6, we go back to 38. Again, that kind of zigzaggy thing because this one again is 3, back to 20, back to 2, and so on. So it's just a matter of 20, calculate this in any other 20 to 10, 22 to 10, 20 again, we go to 40 to 2, and so on. And 40 we go back. So this is the total amount. From 6 we go back to 30. Again, that kind of zigzag. This question, however, have another other one of the 6 in the other one, which is your shortest seek time first, you need to look at 20 and you need to look at what comes before it and what comes after it, right? So in this case, remember it have a 20 in the question as well. So basically we starting at 20, we don't have to go back to 20. In the previous one, what happened is we started at 20, we went to 10, back to 20. From 22, we have other one. This is why it's good to draw it out so you can have it there already. We have 38 here. In the other one, which is your shortest seek time first, we have on this side, we have 10 at 6 and 20. And so at point 22 comes before it and what comes after it. Right? You have to figure out which one is closer. Remember, we don't have to go back to 20. Obviously, we go in with shorter. In the previous one, what happened is we started at 20, we went to 10, down to 10, back to 10. So this is how this diagram should kind of look. 20 to 22, and 22 to 10, 10 to 6, 6 to 2, 2 to 38, 38 to 40. And once you work out the cylinders, or the movement rather, which in this case is this, then you apply it over. It should be 366 by 6. Shortest peak time first. Oh shucks, I have to go off the timeline. I didn't mean to do. So to 59. Starting at 20. From 22, we have one. This one is the scan. And the scan, as I said, is basically elevate here. It goes all the way down. The other one, which is the shortest, all the way up. Seek time first. You need to look at 620. So again, and so at point 22 before it and what tell you sometimes
You
I'll
have
give
to
you the
figure out
direction.
this one way
Remember,
closer. Remember, you
don't
don't
have
have
to
to
go
go
back
back
to
to
20.
20. Obviously, we kind of
In the
short
previous one, what happened is
and
we
we
started
started
at
at
20,
20,
we went to 10,
down to
10
10,
where you started
you're
back
back
to 10. So this is how this diagram should kind of look, drawing this out. And 20 to 22 come back. Coming up 10, 10 to 6, 6 to 2, 2 to 38, 38 to 40. And once you move out the cylinders, or the movement rather, which in this case is this, slide over. In this one too, you will also notice that since you started at 20, you could have at that point, so you don't have to go back to peak time first. So from the 0, we're going to go back to 22 shots and 38 time. So this is how it will go. You work it out. So if you look at this answer here, I'm not sure if you're paying attention to the answer. The answer actually goes in the other direction. It doesn't really matter. The answer went from the 20, as I said, 22 to 38 here, all the way to 59, other one, which is the shortest seek time first. You need to look at the same question. As I said, it really at 20 because it wasn't specified. If it was specified, then it was remember you have to go back to 20. Obviously, we kind of in the previous one, what happened is the same